Well, howdy YouTube, Unky Joe here, Unky Joe's Playhouse. Slightly less hairy than normal. I've decided to go hatless today to give you an idea of what I look like without hair anymore. And yes, it's going to be staying this way. It's just so much easier, although I'm still in the habit of every morning when I get up trying to brush my hair, and it's gone. So, yeah, it's kind of cool though. Now I just got to put sunscreen on my head when I go outside, but enough about me. Today, this video is about my rack reorganization. I've had to move some stuff around on the rack and make way for the new Dell R720 server. I wanted to put the Synology flash station in the rack, etc. I wanted to add a new power strip, and I even wanted to do some LED lighting on the rack. So I don't want to babble on. I want to get right to the video, show you what's been done, and then we'll talk a little bit about it when we come back at the end. So let's take a close look at the rack in its current iteration. I have a couple of Unify switches here, a 10 gig and a 1 gig. And then on the rack, I use keystone jacks on the top. I just find them easier to use. Some are pass-through, some are not. This is a 1 gig PoE switch that is used exclusively for the camera systems. That was donated by Sasha over in the UK. Underneath that is an HP T610 thin client that's used to run our PBX. We're running free PBX. Then our Synology NAS DS918 Plus. Next to that, a Unify security gateway. And then below all of these are reserved for our 2U rack units. We have a couple of Dell R710s and an IBM 3650 Model 3. The Dells are both R710s. One uses 3.5, one uses 2.5. And then our venerable UPS, it's a 1500 VA APC UPS. It's in need of a battery replacement. So that's the goal today, and maybe get some of the cables prettied up and that kind of thing. But here's the rack in its current iteration. So one of the things I really like about this UPS, this is an APC Smart UPS 1500. A little dirty. The thing is old. It's 10 years old probably. But one of the nice things about it is on the back it's got a plug you can pull out to disconnect the battery from all the internals. So now the battery's been failing on this for about a month. I've been getting a warning. 2 months. It could be 2 months. Now, right now, it's sitting on top of that Dell R720 that we're going to try and put in the rack tonight. It's the whole reason we're doing this, because our rack rails are here. Now, piece of tape here. Then I'm going to take out the bottom plate. And then this piece of tape, yeah, it should allow me to pull the batteries out. But it doesn't. So, well, that's great. So, normally you would pull on that piece of tape and the battery would slide right out. But what happens over time as these batteries get used, sometimes they'll swell up a little bit. And there I was, nearly destroying the UPS by not paying attention. So the batteries over time sometimes will swell up. They'll get a little bit larger. The plastic will, the gases or the gel in there will cause the battery to expand. And they can become a little tough to get out of there. Now I was using a screwdriver to try and get a pry point on it to try to get it out, get it slide out. As you can see, that was not working very well. So I ended up tilting the UPS forward to getting the battery to slide out far enough so I could get a grip on it to pull it out the rest of the way. So I hate dealing with UPSs. The batteries are so damn heavy, these things. And that's something you need to consider if you're going to have a rack system like I do, and you're going to have battery backup. You've got to deal with these batteries, and they only last 3 years. I think the most I've ever gotten out of a UPS battery is 5 years, and that was years ago. But this particular UPS has had 3 batteries in it in the course of 10 years. So, yeah, I guess it's averaging about 3 years per battery. And the batteries for this are not cheap. They're close to $200, depending on who you get it from. Now, the battery that's in here now is a reputable battery manufacturer. I've used them before. And it appears I may have made a mistake. It appears the battery I took out, which I'm removing right now, may have not been bad, but may have only needed to have a runtime calibration done on it. That's something you should do when you add a new battery in there and fully charge it, is do a runtime calibration. But I was in a hurry. I did not want to. I did not even think about it, honestly, until we get the new battery, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a moment as we install the new battery. So you're going to see me lifting up the replacement battery here shortly. And, that battery's heavy. I would imagine it weighs about 25 pounds, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. You see the cable on there. It makes it real easy to connect and disconnect these batteries. Now, what I failed to mention is on the back of this UPS is a plug that allows you to actually isolate the battery from the UPS, so that you can, sometimes when you connect up new batteries, they will arc when you first plug them into that little coupler that you saw there. Now, this new battery does have a tab or a piece of tape on the bottom of it, so that in the future, the idea is you can just pull on that tape and slide the battery out. So I've put the battery into the unit, plugged in the coupler, and so now it's a matter of reattaching the front metal faceplate on there. And you have to pull that UPS forward a little bit so that you can get those tabs in the bottom to line up. And then once you do, you just lift it up and then replace the two screws in the front of the unit. If my big head was not blocking the view, you'd see what I was talking about. And it's a little tricky to sometimes get it lined up. Now, I could have just gone out and bought a new UPS for $400 or $500, but I don't like throwing things like this in a landfill. And if the electronics are still working properly, there's no reason not to get a new battery for these things. The issue is to get a reputable, a good, reliable battery, and you're going to pay good money for a reliable battery. You can get a used battery for this for, I don't know, under $200, but or even under $100, I would imagine. But I don't know how reliable that battery would be. And we have our power. We're out in a rural area. Our power is pretty good, but occasionally we get a thunderstorm that'll roll through here, and we'll get little glitches in the power. And that's, if you have a whole rack worth of computer equipment running, it's not a good idea to take your chances without having a UPS. So UPSs are as important to you as backups, because they do offer a level of protection to your equipment. So I strongly recommend them. It's just a matter of popping the front faceplate back on. But again, you see the little lips on the bottom. You have to take that over the edge of whatever you're working on so it can hook in the bottom right there, and then snap in at the top, so that front cover just snaps on. And you need to be careful with that ribbon cable, because over time they deteriorate and they can fail. Just the act of moving them sometimes can cause those ribbon cables to fail. So now what I'm doing is I'm plugging in the plug on the back of the UPS. I know I didn't show that. And we're going to plug it in here to the wall. Now, when you first plug these into the wall, you're going to get a definite noise. It's going to make like a thong noise, like a dong. And that's as the relays kick in there, and it starts the battery charging circuit. So normally these batteries come at about 80 or 90% charge. So it doesn't take long to charge them up. Now, my thought was I was going to put it here on the bench, and as you can see, I turned it on. It shows the battery is fully charged, but the idea was I was going to leave it here on the bench and let it charge a while before putting it into the rack, or putting it back onto the floor in the rack. And you will also notice that when I do get this put back into the rack, that this unit the battery light will start flashing. And that was the whole reason I replaced the battery. I misinterpreted that. I have a UPS card in this, a network card in this UPS, and if I had checked it, it would have told me what the issue was, but unfortunately, I did not check it. Now, what I'm showing you is me sliding the Dell R720 into the rack. I didn't show the mounting of the rack rails. They just basically clip in. And I was so tired by this point, I just wanted to say, hey, look, I got the server mounted. I did remove a shelf from the rack in order to make this happen. And so there I give you the thumbs up to let you know that the new server is now in the rack. So here we are the same night, and I'm just going over what all I accomplished on getting this installed. It still looks a little bit messy, and I haven't got all my shelves in. But I wanted to get the rack back up and running, so I had some functionality, and I decided I'd finish the rest the next day. Anyway, there's the Synology Flash Station 1018 sitting on top of the new Dell R720. So I've got all 4 of my 2U servers into the rack. And that's when I looked over and noticed that the damn UPS was still flashing. So the left LED is the load, and I've only got 2 out of 5 LEDs lit, or 2 out of 6. And the one on the right is the battery indicator. Now, initially I thought I may have a fault in the UPS, but I went back and looked at the UPS logs, and it determined that it could not determine the amount of runtime on the battery, so that's why it's flashing. So I still need to do a runtime calibration on the unit. Now, there were 2 reasons I redid this rack, and one was to get that Dell R720 mounted, and the other was that the power strip I had, the old one, was not capable of handling all the plugs that I needed to use. So I got this Workmate power strip from Walmart. I've used one of them before right here on my telco rack, and those things they're about $25 a piece. They have also USB connectors on them. They are worth every cent that they charge for those. Those power strips are just wonderful, and for my rack they work out really well. So let's do a tour of the rack now that we've got it completed. So starting at the bottom, my IBM X3650 Model 3. I very seldom use that server, but it is there for for doing lab videos and that kind of thing. Same way with the Dell R710 above it, because it only has 2.5-inch drive bays, and that server does use a lot of power. And then my old standby, my Dell R710, with lots of 3.5-inch hard drives in there. It's running Windows Server 2019 with the drive bender drive array, and this is shared storage for audio, video, that kind of thing, for the home audio video. Then the unit above the R710 with the 2.5-inch drives is the new PowerEdge R720. Now, it only has a single drive in there. Well, it has 2 drives, an SSD boot drive. It's running Windows Server 2019. It's running Plex. It's running MB. It's running my surveillance. And the single hard drive that's in there is a 2.5-inch Toshiba 1 terabyte drive. And I simply have that in there just dedicated to video recording for the surveillance video. And then above that is the unit I'm using for PF Sense. That has a Super Micro motherboard in there. Then the Flash Station 1018 on loan to us from Sasha. Again, very fast shared storage. The HP T610 for the free PBX phone system. And then on the shelf above that are Synology DS918 Plus and our Unify Security Gateway. Above that is our PoE switch for our cameras. It was donated to us by Sasha. Same way with that 10 gig switch above it. The Unify, and you'll see I've got a fiber connection. That one fiber connection runs to my workstation. The other 4 are SFP Plus plugs. Our DAC cables, direct attached copper. And then there's a crossover port that goes up to the Unify 24 port switch. Now, I chose to go with Keystone jacks on my patch panel. I just find them a lot easier to use. So then on the floor there is the UPS with the new battery in it. Now, I know my cables look like a mess of spaghetti, but I constantly pull that rack in and out, so I need those cables loose. And they are somewhat distributed, so I know where they all go. On the back end of the rack here are my two silicon dust HD home run tuners that are used for both MB and Plex. So each one of those tuners can tune in two simultaneous over-the-air broadcasts at a time and then pipe that information into MB or Plex. So I chose the best place to mount them was on the back of the rack. Again, my patch plugs, the temperature gauge. I really love this Star Trek rack or Star Tech rack, and I like the patch panel the way I did it. The thing you got to be careful with on some of these pass-through patch inserts is sometimes if you get low-quality ones, which evidently I did, you could have some connectivity issues. Sometimes I have to wiggle the connector to make sure it's got a good connection. On the telco rack, which is where my audio-video equipment is stored, I've got my amp, I've got a Xbox One S, I've got a NVIDIA Shield there, above that I have the TiVo and my Blu-ray player. And then at the very top of that rack I have an old Linksys switch that refuses to die. It's been a really good switch, a gigabit switch. Then the Workmate power strip that I got from Walmart. I love this power strip. It's about $25. It has all kinds of room for my plugs, and it has a couple of USB charging ports on it as well. So that can come in real handy when you need somewhere to plug stuff in. There's my fiber connection coming from my ISP. As you can see, it is fiber to the home. This is the distribution amp or distribution splitter for my over-the-air antenna that is outside of the house and aimed to all the antennas, or to the towers. And then another one of those power strips, Workmate power strips. Again, can't say enough good things about that power strip. It just makes my life a whole lot easier. And we see some wonderful flashing lights coming out from the back of the servers. So while the cables still look like a mess, I am not going to take the time to tie them up because I'm constantly moving this rack around. And there's the Keystone pass-through jacks that I was telling you about. And then I do have some hardwired Keystone jacks in there for connections that go out to the house. But I found out using the pass-through Keystone jacks was a lot more flexible. So this is my Yamaha amp that runs the home theater, the Xbox One X, One S I should say, the NVIDIA Shield. On the back wall there's an old distribution amp I used to use. There's my TiVo and my LG Blu-ray player. And there's the Linksys switch. It's a 24-port gigabit switch. I got off eBay years ago, paid next to nothing for it. And then a plethora of cables going over and crossing over, etc., coming back to the rack. So those of you with ADHD or OCD, if it's kicking in with that wiring, just sorry, you got to live with it. Then the other thing is these are all my hoses coming through, or my high pressure and low pressure lines for my mini split system that Jerry and I installed last summer. It's working well. No problems with it, knock wood, and it's keeps my office and my rack nice and cool or nice and warm, depending on the season, of course. Now, what I'm going to do is, it's a very small closet that this stuff is in, but I have the ability to walk in and out of it, so that's the main thing. So here's another view of the rack from the door, and as you can see, we got lots of blinking lights, and it looks really pretty, doesn't it? In 3, 2, 1. Now, of course, you can't have a server rack without having LED lights on the server rack. So right now, I've just kind of plopped the LED lights on top, but it does make for an interesting light show, especially at night. And yes, my UPS is blinking. The battery has been replaced. The problem is I need to do a what do they call that, a runtime calibration. That's why the battery light is now flashing, so we're going to do that another day. But for now, I just wanted you to see the rack completed. I did get the phone server moved there on top of the Synology FS1018, and everything is working great. The cables have been somewhat managed, and I've shown you that. Got the new power strip on there. Everything is working fine, so I thought I'd wrap up this video with a nice little view of the blinking and flashing LED lights. Now, eventually I will put these lights somewhere else, where I don't know. Right now there's kind of plunked on top, but there you go, YouTube. The rack, for now, is done. Well, for now. But racks are always a work in progress, wouldn't you say? Now, you notice at the end of the video I went handheld and I was showing you the LED lights. And that is the normal level of sound I get out of that rack unit. Now, normally I only have 2 of those Dell servers running at any one time. They run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The R720, of course, is for my shared storage for MB and Plex and my surveillance system. And then the other unit is strictly to host MB, Plex, and my surveillance system. So I have a storage server and I have a application server, and both of those servers are also running Hyper-V, so I can do virtual machines if I need to. And all of the servers have a 10 gigabit connection back to the switch, and my workstation has a 10 gig connection. Now, eventually the plan is to run a 10 gig connection from the rack over to my workbench as well, so that if I want to put a machine over there to do some testing on, I'll have a 10 gig connection. But for now, the rack is going to stay just the way it is. So thanks again for coming to see us. We hope you found the video entertaining and informative as always. Please give a thumbs up down below. Leave your comments in the comments section. Donate if you're so inclined. We take PayPal and we take Patreon. And it's through your generous donations that we're able to keep this channel up and running. Thanks so much for coming to see us, and please don't forget, we will see you on the other side.